A very good evening everyone. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy's daily newspaper analysis. Today is 28 November 2025 and today we have a set of important topics for the discussion. So the first topic is about the labor codes recently brought by the union government, and we'll also understand what are these labor codes, what are its objectives, what are the challenges, and what should be the way forward with respect to these labor codes. So from the exam point of view, these labor codes are also very important. And secondly, recently Supreme Court has issued certain directions with respect to regulation of user content on internet. We'll also be understanding that why there is a need for the regulation of user content on internet, and then we will understand the simultaneous polls. So recently Union Law Ministry has defense simultaneous polls, and then lastly we'll also understand that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has inaugurated Skyroot's first orbital rocket. So these are the topics that we're going to look into. So the first very important topic, it's about the labor codes. So our labor codes are labor friendly, and there is an important editorial that has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and from the syllabus point of view this is a very important for the general studies paper 3. So let's understand about these labor codes. Now in fact the union government has framed 4 important labor codes. Now the first is code on wages. Now it deals with the wages to the labor, right? So minimum wages, fair wages to the laborers. And then the second code is code on industrial relations. So this code on industrial relations, it governs trade unions and the dispute relates to labor, workers and trade unions. And then the third one is code on social security, because for every worker social security is very important. So therefore it concerns with employee benefits insurance. So this comes under the social security domain. And lastly the fourth one is occupational safety, health and working conditions code, right? So therefore this is also a very important aspect, providing safe working conditions for the workers, right? So it focuses on safety and welfare of the workers, right? So these are the 4 labor codes that the union government has formulated on November 21st 2025, and in fact there has been an extensive discussion on the labor codes, impact of these labor codes on India's labor reforms, what are its objectives, what are the challenges. So I hope you have understood the all 4 labor codes. One is code on wages 2019, and then code on industrial relations, code on social security, and then code on occupational safety, health and working conditions. So these are the 4 labor codes that union government has formulated or released on November 21st 2025. Now what is the objective of the labor codes? Now if you look at the objective of this labor code is to create a modern, fair and future ready labor ecosystem in India. So first thing that we should understand that India is going to become a manufacturing superpower or manufacturing powerhouse. And apart from that, we also have the largest demographic dividend as well. Now, in fact, this demographic dividend is going to become the future workforce. So therefore, we need to build a modern, fair and future ready labor ecosystem in India. And that plays a very important role in attracting FDI, right? So first thing is attracting large scale FDI. So investment facilitation or attract investments, domestic investments, and then conducive business environment or ease of doing business, and along with that safety and security of the workforce. Safety and security of the workforce, they would provide these social safety nets for all the workers, and it also helps them alleviate poverty, improve their living standards. So all these things. So because of this objective, the labor codes are being formulated by the union government. So however, let's understand some important facts and details about these labor codes first. Now in fact, the code on wages 2019, so it has mandated that there should be minimum wages for the workers, and apart from that it has also provided for a national level floor wage, right? So this is a same all across the country, and then a timely payment for all the workers by the employers, and at the same time the working hours should be 48 hours a week. So therefore the code on wages 2019, it deals with all these things. There should be a minimum wage, there should be a national level floor price, and at the same time, a timely payment and working hours should also be 48 hours per week, right? And then what Industrial Relation Code 2020 deals with? Now, if you look at the Industrial Relations Code of 2020, now in fact, it has provided for a clear norms. In case of a dispute between the employees and the employer, then there is a mechanism for the faster dispute resolution and even decriminalization as well. So these are the components which are provided in the Industrial Relations Code of 2020. So now let's understand the Code on Social Security of 2020. Now, this Code on Social Security aimed at providing social safety nets, providing social security to the employees, so which is Universal ESIC, Employees State Insurance Corporation, and Employees Provident Fund Simplification, and National Social Security Fund, and in fact recently a different type of workforce, which is gig workforce of platform workers. So they are also included as part of Code on Social Security, because social security for the gig and platform workers is also very important dimension, because they're contract workers, they are temporary workers. So for them also there is a need to extend the provisions of social security. And then Occupational Safety Health Code 2020. Now what this Occupational Safety and Health Code 2020 deals with? So every employer or every company, so it should have certain safety committees. They should mandatorily constitute safety committees, and regular health checkups must be conducted, and workplace standards have to be improved. So better working conditions have to be provided for the workers, and in fact for the women workers, so they have a night work consent as well. So all these things are included in the occupational safety, health and welfare of the workers. However, so if you look at the data about India's total workforce participation in India, so around 643 million workforce, and unemployment has also declined from 6% earlier to 3.2% in the period of 2017-18 to 2023-24. Right, so at this point of time, the unemployment has declined to 3.2%. However, if you look at the female workforce participation, now in fact, the female workforce participation in India is very low compared to other developing countries and developed countries. In fact, there are attempts to increase the female workforce participation through skilling, capacity building, education, higher education. So in fact, if you look at the female workforce participation in India, it is just 32.8% as per International Labour Organization's 2024 data. However, so let's look at the platform workers or gig workers. As I've already told you, these are short-term workers, contract workers or temporary workers. Now, in fact, the benefits of social security are traditionally not extended to the gig workers or platform workers. However, the platform workers or gig workers, it has been expected that they may grow from 1 crore 24-25 to 2.35 crore by 29-30. So that means around 2.35 crore gig workers or platform workers will work throughout the country by 2029 and 30. However, let's understand some key features of the labor codes. Right, so what are the key features? Now, if you look at the key features, as we have already discussed, if we talk about the code on wages, now it is very important that there should be a certain minimum wage that has to be provided to the every worker. So it establishes a universal minimum wages all across the country. So there should be a minimum wage, and employers should not provide wages less than this minimum wage, which is universal minimum wage. And at the same time, this code on wages also fixes national floor price as well. And apart from that, mandatory appointment letters must be given to the employees, and timely wage payments have to be made, and the regulated working hours, that means 48-hour work week. Right, so this is what the code on wages is actually talking about. So that means it gives them better safety and security. And then Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code 2020. Now, in fact, the working conditions, so there should be better working conditions for women. And in fact, the working hours should also be limited. And at the same time, the health of the workers, the occupational safety of the workers is also very, very important. So for that to ensure, preventive health checkups are mandated under Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code. And apart from that, every industry must constitute safety committees regularly, and improved workplace standards should also be mandatory in these companies. And the fourth one is Code on Social Security. Now, the Code on Social Security, its objective is providing universal social security to the workers. So that means universal employees state insurance corporation coverage to all the workers, and streamlined employees provident fund procedures, and even support for the construction sector workers. Now, as of now, the construction sector workers are identified as part of the unorganized sector or informal sector. However, Code on Social Security has also extended its provisions to the construction sector workers via simplified cess payments as well. And apart from that, at the national level, National Social Security Fund will be established as part of the Social Security Code, right? In fact, for diverse worker categories, including the gig workers and platform workers, so all these workers, national level Social Security Fund will be established. And fourth one, the Code on Industrial Relations. It deals with the disputes which are arising from employer and employees, right? So therefore, it also introduces clear international industrial relations norms. And then faster dispute resolution and decriminalization of the minor offenses as well. So these are the key features of the labor codes of 2020. So let's understand some challenges, right? The labor codes are not free from the challenges, and they are also facing various challenges. So let's understand all these challenges in detail. Now, the first thing is that in India, we have around 90%, 85 to 90% of the economy is under the informal sector, right? So, however, these labor codes, these 4 labor codes are expanded to the informal sector. But despite such an expansion, a lot of workers remain outside the formal protection under the 4 labor codes. Now, in fact, if most of the workforce remain under the formal protection of these labor codes, then that means the minimum wages, occupational safety, health of the workers, social security of the workers, so all these provisions might not be extended to those workers who are in the informal sector. This could be the first challenge. So that means they remain vulnerable. The second thing is implementation at the state level, right? Because once these labor codes are being framed, all the state governments must align with the minimum thresholds and at the same time guiding principles, so that there is a uniformity throughout the country. So this uniformity throughout the country is also a very, very important aspect. And then awareness and training gaps are also existing. So once these labor codes are being formulated, in order to implement these labor codes in an effective and efficient manner, there is a need to conduct awareness and training camps. However, employees, workers, officials, they need to be given orientation so that they can better understand these 4 labor codes. And then so we have micro, small and medium enterprises, and these micro, small and medium enterprises are also very important for Indian economy because they are contributing around more than 100 million jobs, and they are also providing around 33% of India's GDP and around 30% of India's total exports. So because of all these reasons, MSMEs are very, very important for Indian economy. However, though these labor codes are being simplified, the initial adjustment to these labor codes by the MSMEs may be a complex process, a complex procedure. It will be very difficult for the smaller enterprises. And then we need to talk about the digital infrastructure domain. right? So if we talk about the digital infrastructure domain, because all these 4 labor codes also talked about algorithm based inspections, but these algorithm based inspections required robust IT systems. Underdeveloped regions may face the implementation delays as well, because the underdeveloped regions and those industries which don't have the capital, so there will be a burden on those industries companies to implement, to align themselves with these labor codes. This could be another major challenge. So let's understand the gender specific challenges as well. So if we talk about the gender specific challenges within these labor codes, safety provisions and maternity benefits need effective enforcement. For example, the maternity leave of 26 weeks should be enforced in an effective manner. And apart from that, this POSH Act, prevention of sexual harassment of women at workplaces, so this has to be implemented in letter and spirit. And apart from that, gig workers, platform workers, so all the benefits of social security, social safety must be extended to the gig workers. So gig workers should also be included as part of these labor codes, right? So ensure a meaningful social security coverage, and portability is a complex challenge for the gig workers. So what should be the way forward? The way forward should be, so taking into consideration all these challenges, so there is a need to achieve the uniformity all across the country. There is a need to provide certain concessions, exceptions to certain industries for some period of time, like micro, small and medium enterprises. Cover the other uncovered sectors into these labor codes, and extend better social security and social safety for the gig workers. So all these things have to be done in future, right? So next important topic, it's about Supreme Court recently issuing guidelines for the center to regulate user content on internet. Now this is very important topic for the General Studies paper 2, and this topic has been given in the Hindu newspaper. So let's understand what is the view of the Supreme Court in this context. Now recently the Supreme Court has suggested setting up an autonomous online content regulator. Now in fact, so after the social media, after access to internet, after everybody having access to the mobile phones, what has been happening has, there has been a lot of content which is flooding the internet, right? So therefore it has suggested to establish an autonomous online content regulator. So the responsibility of this online content regulator is to regulate the content, to monitor the content, particularly the digital obscenity, protect free speech of individuals, and also verify age of individuals who are using internet with the Aadhaar and PAN verification, right? So this is what the Supreme Court has said. However, the crux of it is issued directions to establish an autonomous online content regulator. However, the government has been planning amendments to the existing IT rules to define and curb obscene digital content, right? So this is the context. Now let's understand what the Supreme Court has said in this context, right? So in fact, the Supreme Court has held that, so there is a need for an autonomous panel. What is the objective of this autonomous panel? It will monitor the digital obscenity. So content in the digital domain, on the digital domain, which may be obscene in nature, right? So at the same time, it also protect the free speech of individuals, and at the same time, it also verify the age of individual as well. Now, in fact, it is not considered as a gag order, rather than it is a healthy regulation of social media. And apart from that, there should be guardrails, and these guardrails must protect fake news, which is freely spread across online. And at the same time, there is also a need to protect the right to free speech of individuals. So for that particular purpose, so the government should establish an autonomous online content regulator. So let's understand Supreme Court's key core concerns and what are its suggestions. So if you look at the Supreme Court's core concerns in this context, Supreme Court has clearly observed that self-regulation mechanisms on social media platforms are ineffective in curbing online obscenity. Now, in fact, there are self-regulation mechanisms, and these self-regulation mechanisms are mandating that those who are actually producing the content, so they should regulate themselves, keeping in mind the larger public interest. Rather than that, there is no central regulator to regulate content which has been promoting obscenity, right? So, however, since these self-regulation mechanisms are ineffective, particularly in curbing online obscenity, misinformation, and harmful content which is freely spread across the online platforms. This is what the Supreme Court has clearly underlined and highlighted. However, a Supreme Court, a bench of CJI Suryakant and Justice Joy Malia Bagchi, so they have actually proposed a solution for the same, which is an autonomous authority. Now, what is the responsibility of this autonomous authority? The responsibility of this autonomous authority is the regulation of online obscenity, protection of free speech, prevention of the spread of fake news online, and at the same time, age, verification through Aadhaar and PAN card, right? So therefore, on the one hand, they uphold Article 19 Clause 1 and Subclause A, which talks about the freedom of speech. And at the same time, they also regulate fake news. They also regulate the obscene content online, right? So in fact, the court has also suggested that using Aadhaar or PAN for age verification, so that children who don't look at the sensitive information or sensitive content, right? So minors accessing inappropriate content. However, so this is in response to a case filed by YouTuber Ranveer Alhabadia and others. And in fact, they have even challenged the FIRs over the allegedly obscene remarks made in Samay Raina's show India's Got Latent. Now, in this particular show, so Ranveer Alhabadia made certain remarks which are, derogatory in nature. So because of that reason, FIR has been filed. So however, so they have filed a case challenging this FIR against them. In fact, court is also hearing a complaint by SMA Cure Foundation. And this SMA Cure Foundation is also alleging that the comedians are also making derogatory comments against persons with disabilities. And therefore, it has been raising concerns about the digital hate speech against certain vulnerable communities. So in this context, the Supreme Court has actually made these remarks. So let's understand the key constitutional and regulatory concepts which actually govern the freedom of speech and expression. So as I've already told you that Article 19 Clause 1 and Subclause A, it deals with freedom of speech and expression, and it is a fundamental right to every citizen. Secondly, Article 19 Clause 2. However, every citizen enjoys freedom of speech and expression, but it is subjected to reasonable restrictions. Now, what are those reasonable restrictions? Decency, morality, sovereignty, security of the state, and public order. So these are the reasonable restrictions to enjoy freedom of speech and expression. However, in 2021, Union government has framed IT rules. Now, the IT rules have established a three-tier grievance redressal system for the digital media, regulate OTT platforms, social media intermediaries, and digital news. So with the objective of regulation of all these platforms, the IT rules 2021 have been framed by the Union government. However, in India, the obscenity test is conducted historically by Hicklin test. However, later it has been replaced by community standard test after multiple judgments from the Supreme Court. Right? So if we talk about the Aadhaar verification, it is permitted only on voluntary basis, and mandatory use raises privacy and proportionality concerns. And in fact, in Puttaswamy judgment, in the year 2017, Supreme Court has declared that right to privacy is a fundamental right under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So I hope you have understood this. So the next important topic is Union Law Ministry has defense simultaneous polls. Now, in fact, this has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and from the syllabus point of view, this is very important for General Studies paper 2. Let's first understand what are the simultaneous polls in India. Now, simultaneous polls involve conducting elections to both Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies at the same time. So as of now in India, so general elections for Lok Sabha are not conducted along with the state legislative assembly election for all the states. Right? The objective is conducting Lok Sabha elections along with the elections of all state legislative assemblies. Right? However, this system of simultaneous elections was existed earlier, immediately after independence. But because of this president's rule, dissolution of the state legislative assemblies, because of all these reasons, it broke down due to the premature dissolutions of parliament and state legislative assemblies. However, because of certain advantages that the simultaneous polls hold, there is a debate and discussion about reviving simultaneous polls in India. So let's understand the historical background of simultaneous polls. Now, if you look at the historical background, so 1952, 1957, 1962 and 1967. Now, in fact, all these general elections to the Lok Sabha. Now, in fact, most states assemblies were also held simultaneously along with the elections to the Lok Sabha. However, this cycle was disrupted after 1967 and 69 when several state legislative assemblies and even Lok Sabha was dissolved prematurely. But now there has been a larger debate to revive simultaneous polls all across the country. And in fact, Niti Aayog has recommended simultaneous elections. The Standing Committee of the Parliament has also recommended simultaneously, and even Law Commission has also made certain recommendations with respect to the simultaneous election. However, in 1999, the Law Commission in its 170th report on reform of electoral law said that holding simultaneous polls would be ideal in India. However, there should be a workable formula is required to be in the constitution to hold simultaneous elections in India. However, holding of separate election to assemblies should be an exception and not a rule. It should be an exception only if we wanted to hold separate election to the state legislative assemblies. Right? So in fact, there has been a committee which has been constituted under the former President of India, Ramnath Kovind, about the simultaneous elections. Right? So in fact, this committee has also in favor of holding simultaneous elections all across the country. So let's understand what is the rationale for conducting simultaneous elections. So why there is a need to conduct simultaneous polls. Now, it is generally believed that simultaneous elections would improve governance and would result in administrative efficiency, because whenever elections are conducted, the Election Commission of India announces election schedule. Immediately after the announcement of election schedule, the Model Code of Conduct comes into force. However, Model Code of Conduct imposes certain restrictions and limitations when it comes to the implementation of the welfare programs. So this Model Code of Conduct, in fact, affects the governance and administrative efficiency, because throughout the year, so everywhere in one part or the other part, so the country is in the election mode. For example, recently Bihar elections took place, and the next Assam elections will also take place. So everywhere there is this Model Code of Conduct, regular elections. So therefore it has been affecting the governance and administrative efficiency. Right? So therefore, in 2015 Parliamentary Committee, so it has noted that MCC implementation leads to the policy paralysis. So because of this reason also, there is a need for simultaneous elections. So if simultaneous elections are conducted, so MCC will be in place only for a certain period once in a 5 years. So after 5 years elections are done, there will be no MCC, then it will lead to a better administration, better governance of the places. Then it will also result in the reduction of the cost as well. So if we talk about the reduction of the cost, the Election Commission has estimated that conducting 2014 elections, so it costs around 3,870 crore rupees. Now in fact, it excluded security and parties expenditure. So in fact, it is a huge amount of money that Election Commission of India has spent on conducting elections. However, if we conduct elections simultaneously for Lok Sabha and State Legislative Assembly, it will substantially reduce public expenditure on aspects like logistics, manpower and security forces. And then reduced disruption as well. So reduced disruption in the sense that there will be no regular disruption in the governance, because frequent deployment of security forces will affect national security. So that is the problem here. Now apart from that, schools and public buildings used as polling stations face operational disruptions. You need to provide the security forces, you need to provide manpower. So all these factors have been creating a lot of burden on the Election Commission of India and other relevant infrastructure all across the country. Right? So however, there are certain challenges in conducting simultaneous elections. So the first thing, it requires constitutional amendment to Articles 83, Article 85, Article 172 and Article 174. And it also requires amendments to the Representation of People Act 1951 to hold simultaneous elections. Now, apart from that, a stable 5-year cycle needs a mechanism for no confidence motion. For example, if any no confidence motion has been introduced in any state legislative assembly, elections will be held. Now, the main question is that the reconstituted state legislative assembly will work for the remainder of the period only, or it will work for a full term of 5 years. So as of now, if any state legislative assembly is dissolved and elections took place, and the reconstituted state legislative assembly will enjoy a full term of 5 years, right? So apart from that, there is a need for the political consensus as well, because the regional parties are not ready to accept the simultaneous elections. It may favor the ruling parties at the center, and it may not favor the opposition political parties as well. So therefore, states are fearing that they may lose their autonomy over their electoral cycle, the first thing. And apart from that, smaller parties argue that it may favor the larger national parties due to the national narrative effect. And then, so logistical issues. For example, we need AVMs that have to be distributed all across the country. Voter verifiable paper audit trial machines. So estimated previously at 35 to 35 lakh machines for a single cycle of election. So therefore, it may create logistical challenges for the Election Commission of India. So however, despite challenges, it is important to conduct simultaneous elections because it is having a lot of advantages. It improves administration and governance. It may not result in frequent diversions of the security forces for the election arrangements and other staff. And at the same time, it may also reduce the burden on the Election Commission of India and may also reduce expenditure as well. So next important topic is Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurates Skyroot's first orbital rocket. So in fact, this has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and from the syllabus point of view, this could be very important for prelims and even general studies paper 3 as well. So let's understand this. What is the context? The context is Prime Minister Narendra Modi has inaugurating Skyroot's Aerospace Infinity Campus and unveiling the company's first orbital rocket, which is Vikram 1. So Vikram 1 is going to be company's first orbital rocket, which is 480 kgs to 500 kilometer low inclination orbit, right? So in fact, it is a major milestone in India's private sector space firms, because it indicates India's growing private space sector and even strengthening of country's position as a global leader in the space sector, right? So Skyroot is a private space firm in India established by Nag Bharat Dhaka and Pawan Chandana. And in fact, they have developed India's first privately developed rocket, which is Vikram 1. Right, so in fact, Skyroot's Vikram series of space launch vehicles. So these are the space launch vehicles, and they are named after Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, who is the founder of Indian space program. So first Vikram 1, and then they will develop Vikram 2, and then they will also develop Vikram 3 as well. So they are these space launch vehicles. So that's all for today, and thank you so much. So please subscribe our YouTube channel and also like our video. Thank you so much.